If you're learning about narcissism and you have had problems with narcissistic or toxic people in your life, then one of the most common thoughts you might have is, how do I avoid these people? How can I tell earlier? Once you start to recognize the signs, you may start to realize there are more toxic people than you could imagine. Some videos and articles have mentioned that you should be able to sense in your body that something isn't right and to listen to that. But most of us who have been victims of narcissistic abuse have been unfortunate enough to have had a narcissist or other toxic person in our lives early, and perhaps they were even a caregiver. So we haven't been able to listen to our bodies in so long that the signals are unfamiliar or almost silent. So how could we recognize the signs earlier and save ourselves some heartache? I believe there are some clear signs that you can look for while you're still strengthening your intuition. Now, these could present themselves when you meet a person for the first time or after just a few times. Number 1, the too long stare. Sometimes when you first meet a person after you've said a few sentences, you will notice that all of a sudden you get a blank, intense stare. Usually it's right after you finish a statement and they don't take up the slack. And they don't start talking. It creates a somewhat uncomfortable silence. Now, if they happen to be someone that you might be romantically attracted to, you could misinterpret this as romantic interest. But usually, this is a narcissist or other toxic person summing you up and trying to figure you out. You may have even felt like that was what was really going on. And you feel like the person was trying to understand you and doesn't quite get it. But usually we dismiss thoughts like this. And we usually choose to think the person is interested in us, attracted to us, or we said something wrong. So at this moment, when that uncomfortable silence is just hanging in the air, you may start a new tack of conversation because you feel uncomfortable with the silence and the fact that you feel that person is not understanding you, and maybe there's a little bit of disapproval. If this feels familiar to you, it's possible that this was an early warning sign of narcissism. The next time you meet a new person, watch for this reaction. It's really not that normal. There's no reason to stare intensely at a new person that you've just met. And it really is usually obvious if the person is a shy and awkward person. They show clear signs. But a narcissistic person stares straight at you, not blinking, and they are not nervous. They may actually be trying to take control of the situation and see what you will do if they make it uncomfortable. If you scramble to keep the conversation going and try to make it comfortable again, they've got you. They know you are a good target. This one can be a little bit hard to catch in the moment, but I invite you to think back on some of the first meetings that you've had with some people that you later realized were toxic. Does it sound familiar? Number 2, the "what did you mean by that?" question. Sometimes on the first meeting with a person, if they are a narcissist or toxic, you might notice that all of a sudden they interrupt you and ask you bluntly, "What did you mean by that?" You were making a casual statement. Maybe you laughed. Maybe you are using some sort of expression that is in common use, but they had to interrupt you and ask you what you meant by that. This is usually accompanied by a stare and kind of a face of they're confronting you somewhat. It stops your thinking and puts you on the defense. Now, it could have even been something as simple as a hand gesture. Maybe you didn't even say anything. but effectively you have been stopped in your tracks and asked to defend and explain yourself. And I have noticed that usually what they ask you to explain is the kind of thing any normal person would understand. And what it does is it creates confusion and self-doubt. And the fact that they didn't understand this simple everyday expression, once again, makes you question yourself, and it makes you feel uncomfortable, and you feel like you need to defend yourself or explain. And usually after you spin your wheels and explain and try to smooth things over, the narcissist will say, "Oh, okay," as if they'll let you pass, and then you feel somewhat relieved. Now, it's possible that this is also the narcissist testing you out to see if you will defend yourself and see if you are willing to be subtly devalued and insulted. Number 3, abnormal responses to the word crazy. This is much more obvious in a person that is known to you to be a narcissist, but if you pay attention, you may notice it in others that you may not suspect. Have you ever casually said, "That's crazy," or "You're so crazy," or "You just mean it in a fun way"? But a narcissist will overreact and get angry. They will say, "I'm not crazy." That word crazy really does get them angry. Probably deep down underneath, they do understand there's something wrong with them. But especially when you just meet someone, if they overreact to this word, run. Number 4, careless. Now, we all know narcissists are careless with our time, feelings, money, belongings, etc. But if you pay attention to when you first meet them, you will discover they are careless with their own things as well. I don't know about you, but I've never lost my wallet or keys more than once in my entire life. But if you find out that they have lost such important things frequently and can't explain where they went, it could reveal an infantile mind, one that isn't really a responsible adult. A couple of different toxic people I have known were constantly unable to remember passwords, causing them to have serious problems with their bank or computer. Another person was very careless with their passport and left it at an immigration booth and then took someone else's instead. Another was constantly losing their wedding ring. Some tend to have a few more car accidents than average. And when they are asked what happened, it's either the other person's fault or they just don't know. They don't know what happened. Now, some people who are not narcissistic are still forgetful or accident prone, but they usually own their behavior. The key difference here is that a narcissist will minimize their fault or simply ignore that anything happened. And if their carelessness affects you, they will be annoyed that you brought it up. So you may not see any or all of these right away, but they usually do assert themselves early on in the relationship, and many times the very first time you meet someone. Comment below. Have you seen any of these signs? Can you think of anything else?